On today's episode of Altered Life, we're going to be talking about recovery. More specifically, measuring recovery. How do you measure the trajectory of someone's life? Let's dive in and see what we can learn from the unlikely story of today's guest, David Whitesock.
Where does gratitude come from? As a survivor of the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs, over the last 9 years, as my disease has gone into remission, I've asked that question often because every day that I wake up, I'm grateful for being able to stand here.
Today, David is the CEO and founder of Commonly Well. According to their website, they illuminate the truth about addiction through recovery intelligence.
I had the opportunity to take this thing that I invented and then bring it into a new company, Commonly Well.
So you're measuring well-being in sobriety as a measure.
Yeah, I like to use the example of employment is a really good one. Like a lot of places will check a box, we got Lindsay employed, we're done. But what we don't know and what we're not asking is, Lindsay, does your employer support your current state in recovery and want to help you in that process? Is the culture good for you to be well?
When he was younger, untreated depression and social anxiety led David to an alcohol addiction starting at the age of 17.
I just had deep social anxiety and didn't know how to do it. Didn't work for me. And then I was introduced to alcohol.
How old were you when that happened, when you discovered?
17.
17 years old. So that's kind of late, actually, compared to some other stories, right?
Does our dark past prevent us from living a bright future? If we could measure that brighter future with technology, could we improve it? Blurring the lines between your social economic status and receiving great care. Find out all these things and more on today's episode of Altered Life.
So we already know what we're going to call our artificial intelligence.
What is it? Can you
share it with you? Yeah. So, and it's an homage to somebody who saved my life. We're going to call it Kirby. So I can imagine 5 years from now, someone's going to pick up Kirby and go, hey, Kirby, who are my next 3 appointments today? Tell me a little bit about their progress up to this point. And what are the top things I need to be concerned about in my sessions with those 3 people? And it's going to speak back to me. It's going to tell me what I need to know. It's going to highlight those issues. And I'm going to be more prepared with an augmented set of information coming from a lot of different sources so that I can now sit down with the first person I have to sit down with and actually be a human relationship with that person.
David Whitesock, thank you for joining the Altered Life podcast. I'm thrilled. I'm honored. I'm privileged. You probably know this, but I've been a fan for a while. I think you and I first met a couple years back at TCIV, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And was at Scottsdale, Arizona. Kind of been following you prior to that and seeing the work that you had been doing from afar. And I was attracted to what I saw. Do you remember when we first met?
I do. I think we were standing in front of either my booth or some other booth at TCIV, and I remember hearing about what you were doing and thinking to myself, that was the scale I was trying to reach when I was doing peer support and peer coaching, and I wanted to sit there and just ask you a million questions to figure out how you did it. So. No, the honor and privilege is mine. So I'm grateful for the invitation and this conversation.
Great. So what would you like to tell the audience about, what you're currently doing and your endeavors at this point? You want to bring the audience up to speed on what you're doing and who you are?
Yeah. So I'm CEO of Commonly Well. We are we like to call it a recovery intelligence firm, which is business intelligence for behavioral health, bringing data into the speed that addiction care needs, and that business has been using for so long, which you fully understand in your past work. I started the company about 3 years ago. I live in the Adirondacks of northern New York. We're in a little rural village up here. We moved here because my wife is a professional cellist and a professor, and there's a music school up here that she teaches at within the state university system. And so I'm fortunate that I can do my work and what I have a passion for pretty much anywhere. I have a background in technology. So I started a technology web development company back in 2004, right at the heels of podcasting. So I was one of the very first few people in the world doing podcasting, and that's a whole other story we can get into. But before that, I was a professional radio broadcaster. And in the middle of all of that, addiction had a pretty big impact upon my life, and I had hit reset in 2005, and that led me to law school, and then led me into doing this work in South Dakota that was at the heart of social entrepreneurship and figuring out how do you use business practices and the latest and greatest of world-class people and technologies to get at one of the hardest human things we know. And that is helping people overcome the struggle with addiction. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
What a great descriptor there. There's a lot in that, and we're going to start to unpack some of that. But I've got to go to this place because I'm really curious. I did notice you have some pipes. Do you mind giving me like how you would do your sign on or sign off when you're at the radio station? Come on, man. Let me hear how you did it.
It's been so long since I used to do that, but my voice today sounds exactly like it did then. It's one thing that I kind of prided myself on was not having what they call sort of a puking voice in radio. So I didn't do that sort of over modulation. It was what you hear is what I was. And the only difference is my sign on and sign off was I'm Dave Miller.
Nice. Oh, different. Okay. That was your I was your persona, your radio persona.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I'm curious. Well, thank you for giving me that sign off. That was good. I'm curious as to Whitesock. Where does Whitesock originate from?
Well, my father's side of the family is Polish and Native American, Cherokee, Virginia. And so I think it's my great-great-great-grandfather had a very difficult to pronounce Polish name with a W and a couple of J's and Z's in there. And he married a Cherokee woman in the coal country of Virginia. And he died, and she couldn't pronounce the name. And she thought it sounded like Whitesock. And so there it stuck.
Do you know where it came? What was the name before Whitesock was born?
It sounds a lot like Wojciech. I'm probably getting that pronunciation wrong, but we have an audio tape of my grandmother who has recorded it, and so we've got a pretty good ancestral tree of everybody. And one part of the story says that somebody coming over from Poland at Ellis Island used Whiteside. So there was these dueling stories about the name, and maybe instead of an I, it was an O. But it's an interesting little nugget. And there's maybe 15 of us with that name in the world.
We all have those. Not all of us. Many of us have those stories about how the name was changed on Ellis Island, right? So you're one of those. So that's an interesting backstory. Thanks for sharing that with me. I was just curious about Whitesock. It's a cool name, but it's a name that was made, right? It was self-made.
It was a name that was made to fit. Yeah.
It's so interesting because you start opening up right away kind of the stories of life, how things kind of unfold. And so I'm curious in your background, do you have any history of, you told me you had to press reboot was that 2005? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
I
yeah.
too had to press reboot a couple of times, actually, not just once.
I don't know if you're living life. If I don't think you're living life right if you don't have to hit reset at least once or twice in your life.
Right. Yeah. So I'm more than two. I won't say how many more, but there's quite a few more than two. And so in your background, the generational aspect of things, is there a history of maybe having to press reset? Is there a generational, is there a history around this in your background?
So my family, both on my mom's and my dad's side, are both very working class, from Detroit, Michigan, and from Maine, Lewiston, Maine, which was most recently in the news. And so you kind of got a glimpse of what that community was like, and that's my mom's family, that area. And so there wasn't really so much of a reset other than maybe a little bit of a breaking of the cycle of trying to get out of the grind of being that deep working poor. And so my father decided to join. My mother and father separately decided to join the military, and they met in, I think it was 1971 or 72 in Minot, North Dakota. And so that they kind of did their 2 years or 3 years and decided to get out after enlisting and went back to Detroit for a bit. And I think my dad looked around and said, no, this is not what I want. And so it was like, we're going back to the military, and the military has a sense of humor. So they said, great, we're going to send you back to our version of Siberia. You're going back to North Dakota. And so skip ahead a year. I was born in 75 and the first child of three. And so I think that was the reset. For the most part, the rest of my family, it's kind of like they get on a path and away they go.
So tell me more. You basically are born into a military family. Would you have been considered a military brat? Is that kind of, did you fall in that category?
Absolutely fell in that category. Yeah, we didn't move a lot. So, interesting, in the 80s, 70s and 80s in the Air Force, you were either tied to planes, or you were tied to missiles, cause it was the Cold War. And so, my father was part of the leadership that, maintained and kept missiles ready to go in the ground that were pointed, to across the globe to the Soviets. And I remember as a kid going into what was called the block building on base, and I'm sure I wasn't allowed to go in there, but it was a room that had this very sort of war games kind of thing with like a diode map. Today it would be all like a digital television screen, but then it was like a wooden map with these light bulbs sticking out. Some of them are red and some of them are green. And I remember asking, so what do the lights mean? And the simple answer was the ones that are green are ready to go, and they are pointing at a target, and they can be fired in a moment's notice to blow up some portion of the world. And the ones that are red are not.
Intense, man. Yeah. So you're a kid. How old are you at this time when you were told this?
10, 11.
And, looking back, you maybe at the time you didn't realize how intense that was for a 10 or 11-year-old to like hear that. And, how did that feel, do you think, looking back in hindsight?
Now I look back at it and I go, oh, that was just kind of neat. This was Top Gun era. I kind of thought I wanted to be a fighter pilot and, probably go down that direction and be in the military because that's what we knew, or a baseball player, right? Because I played a lot of baseball and was halfway decent at it. And, but yeah, now I look back at it and you tend to, you tend to see the gravity, especially the way our world is turning today, of what those people were doing, guarding those mass weapons of something of
Mass
stability at that time.
destruction. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember, you probably do too, doing the drills where you would get under the desk, which even as a kid, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. How is this going to save me in the event of, an atom bomb or mushroom clouds emerging from all around?
And what's interesting about that is, even when thinking about it now, living on an Air Force base, which had the buttons for the missiles, which were hundreds of miles out in the ground of North Dakota and South Dakota and Montana, we didn't have bunkers. Yeah, we were hiding under our desk too. And now I think about it and I laugh and I go, we probably should have been a little bit more protected. But
right.
No, we were doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, you're on ground zero, literally, right? Literally.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, if you watch the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick, one of the first bases to get destroyed is Grand Forks Air Force Base, which is where we were living.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was a clear target. Yeah.
Well, very interestingly, coincidentally, I was in the Marine Corps, and I never got to leave the state of California in my entire tour of duty in the Marine Corps. I ended up guarding special weapons at a naval weapons station with bunkers, and the alpha area is what we called it, right? Where the special weapons were housed. And it was a different time. We were really, the arms race was a real thing. And there was just this, I remember just thinking at any given moment, if something were to go wrong, literally we could just obliterate all of mankind. Yeah. I'm sure that's still the case, but it's not as much top of mind as it was back then, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not. And so we were stationed at Vandenberg for about 4 years. So we had a short stint, and my brother, who's 5 years younger than my sister and I, we always joked growing up that because he was born in California, we just picked him up when we went out there. He wasn't one of us. And that was a joke for a while. It's funny when we joke about that he turned out okay. I was the one that had the problems with fitting in and in addiction.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that journey. How did that start, to the extent you can roll it out for us? What's the story? What's your story? How did that go for you?
Well, I'll give you the rear view understanding of that, because I think it's a better way of sort of describing the story. After many, many years of psychotherapy and sitting down with psychologists and playing, Back to the Future of my mind, there were very clear moments of my childhood that were symptoms and episodes of deep depression from the age of 10, 11, 12. And the story that sticks out most was, as I mentioned earlier, I like to play baseball. And there would be Saturdays or Tuesdays in the summer, and all my friends would show up knocking on the door with their bikes and their gloves and ready to go to the sandlot. And I would tell my mom I'm staying home. And she'd be like, "What are you talking about? You're not sick." And I'm like, I'm not going out. And I would sit in my room, lights off, paging through baseball cards. I can't see them because the lights are dark, but just sitting there by myself. And that was it was a clear indication that nobody could see that something wasn't quite right. And so, you get older and you start to sort of ingrain with social elements and trying to grow up as a young man and all of those things. And I just had deep social anxiety and didn't know how to do it. Didn't work for me. And then I was introduced to alcohol. And in the middle of that too, my parents were divorced, and, my mom moved off base, and we moved to a small little rural North Dakota town that, I was the Air Force brat. So I got picked on because I didn't, work on a farm and move beets and grain around. So I was different. And so it was just a lot of like little things that just sort of, contributed to, once alcohol was introduced into my life, like you hear from a lot of people.
Yes.
It was the thing. It was like, this is the way everybody else feels. And all of a sudden my ability to engage, changed overnight, but I didn't have the off switch. And I didn't, if I tried to use the off switch, I didn't like what was on the other side of the off switch.
Right. How old were you when that happened, when you discovered?
17.
17 years old. So that's kind of late, actually, compared to some other stories, right?
Well, I mean, look at how I'm dressed here. My shirt's buttoned up to the top.
Right.
I was a pretty reserved, conservative, keep my nose clean kind of kid. I didn't like trouble. I even to this day, I mean, I'm pretty, I've got some OCD tendencies. I kind of, yes, I like to break the rules in certain ways. Like, we're in business. And so where can we find the place where we can move the envelope? I'm pretty prone to that. But for the most part, it was like, I'm not sneaking out of the house. I'm not doing those things. But the moment that opportunity came, it was like, oh, okay, now let's rock and roll.
Yeah. That opportunity, did it come in a social setting? Did it come where you by yourself? Like, how did that happen? How did you trip across this thing called alcohol that was the miracle elixir to all of your problems? How did that happen?
It's a good question. Once upon a time, somebody said to me, and I think it may have been a 12-step meeting or somewhere. Somebody said, if you remember the first time you drank alcohol, that is a clear sign that you're an alcoholic. And
I agree. I so agree with that. Yes. Yeah.
I've thought about that for a long, long time because I really remember that day. And so I had a Ford F-150 pickup, 1986, King cab. It had a cover on the back. And the heater core was broke. So for any of those people out there that drove old pickups, that my when you turn the heat on, the smell of the truck was probably like a maple syrup kind of a smell. Yeah,
permeated everything too, right? Yeah.
It did. It was everywhere. And so it was a Friday night. It was football night, and this is again rural North Dakota. So there's only one thing to do on Friday nights. You go to the football game, and then after the football game, you go out to the fields and the shelter belts, and you crack open a bunch of beers, you light a bonfire, and you have a little bit of a party. And so that was what was going on. There were two bonfires at this place. One side was the country side. The other side was the rock and roll Def Leppard side. I was over there sitting in the truck, and it was a Busch Light pounder. And that was it. It was like, okay, where's that girl I like?
Mm-hmm. And all the inhibitions go away. Lots of courage, lots of confidence comes in, right?
All the courage, everything. And from that point, it was like, okay, when it came time to think about going to college, which nobody in my family had ever done, it made perfect sense that I would follow the 7 or 8 friends in my class that I hung out with most, because they were going to go to North Dakota State and be engineers. And I was like, I like to draw. I'll be an architect. Like, I had no real sense that that's what I wanted to do, although I had a penchant for design. But yeah, so it was like that made sense. I was just that the winds were going that direction.
And then what happens from there? You end up at North Dakota State. Are you already kind of a little bit out of control? What's going on when you enter into college? What's the state of David Whitesock?
It was a disaster from day one.
It was. Okay.
You take the reins off and it gets pretty ugly pretty quick. And,
no adult supervision, no oversight, right? No.
Yeah. Well, what was ironic about it was within the first year, I'd go to class. I didn't really apply myself. That was kind of my problem. And very few people would get into the architecture program at North Dakota State after their first year. I happened to have gotten in. I don't know how. And so by year 2, now I had new responsibilities because I was an early admit into the program, and I didn't like sitting in a Quonset, a big barn, 24 hours a day, working on scale models of Duluth, Minnesota. That I couldn't do that. So that was an easy out for me. We had our own apartment, 4 guys living off campus. And the night before my birthday, December 18th this would be 1995, we get evicted.
Oh.
And so now I'm
And
starting to go.
it had to be
what do I-
cold. Don't tell me it's in the middle of the winter. What was
Oh,
this?
it's the middle of the winter.
Oh, great.
yeah.
Yeah. Come on.
It's 15 degrees and 20 inches of
Oh,
snow out.
no.
Yeah, so we got 3 days to
Oh,
figure out what we're going to
no.
do.
You're kidding me.
And mind you, my 3 roommates, 2 of whom are still alive, one of them passed in a car accident. All 3 of them were well on their way to becoming super professional people. One is a ER physician, and another one is an engineer. I mean, these were really, really smart people. This was not in the cards for them.
Not smart
And
behavior, clearly.
Yeah, no, they and they moved on from that event. I clearly did not. I switched universities, went to North Dakota State or University of North Dakota, and got my first DUI a year later, and would then start to pick up a couple of DUIs and drop out of school. But that's where the radio thing came in. I was in between figuring out what I was going to do, and then all of a sudden my phone rings, and a guy from high school who was a social outcast found himself behind a microphone. And this was 1997. Grand Forks had a massive flood, 500-year flood. So it was really disrupting the whole community. And there were announcers that couldn't make it to the radio station. But I lived outside of town, away from the water, and I could get there. And he's like, "We need your help. You want a job?" My only question was, how much does it pay? Because I had a habit, and I knew it, and I needed cash. And he's like, "Well, it pays this." I'm like, "Great." So whatever my fears of public speaking were, if Paul can do it, I can do it. So that was 1997, and that began a decade-long career of pretty much doing anything you could think of in radio.
And it was also the vehicle to help you get what you really wanted as well. Is that correct? Like
because now I could afford an apartment. I had stable income, and I could do something that I eventually found a great deep love for. I really dug into what radio was, and I learned everything I could, a little bit out of survival. If I was the one that could climb the tower and change the light bulbs, and I got a DUI the next day, they probably weren't going to fire me. And that happened a couple of times.
So what is it about radio that just fired you up? What was it that made it work for you? You loved it, you said. I heard love. Love's a powerful word.
It's this. My job wasn't just spinning records or CDs, although that was part of it. I got to do a daily talk show. So 3 hours in the morning. I hosted the noon news hour, took a couple hours break in the afternoon, came back on at 5, and then I did play-by-play sports in the evening. And so what I really loved was this part. So first in the morning, telling the stories of the community, talking to people like you, the movers and shakers, the people trying to disrupt and impact and make good. Presidential candidates, people writing books.
Wait a second. Aren't you the anxious, socially awkward isolator? And now all of a sudden you love to connect with people?
It was weird. When it was in this confine, this controlled environment that I got to control, because I had all the controls. I got to pick the music. I got to pick the script. I got to pick the questions. I got to direct it. That changed the whole dynamic.
And you got comfortable doing that. And it did it always work out the way you wanted it to?
No.
You're right.
No, because one thing to think about is I was 26, 27 years old, and I'm sitting on the air with people 20, 30 years my senior, who are actually the old boys club of the community. And I'm presenting different thoughts, different views, and yes, and sometimes playing along to get along, because that was the nature of things. But I'd get in trouble often. I'd get phone calls from city council people and various business folks saying you should tone that down. You should take a different view. And I didn't care. I was intoxicated most of the time, so I was like, whatever. Let's just do. We're on Speedway train. Let's go. What's
Oh my
next?
goodness, that must have been rich. I would have. Do you have any of those videos or recordings anywhere that you could share with me at some point?
I have a box of tapes.
Oh, please shoot me one. I would love to just see what that
Yeah.
was like. But
Yeah.
do you think any of it was also that you did genuinely like to connect with other people? Do you think that was part of it?
So my years of therapy would tell me this was my replacement for not getting the connection that I got or wanted or felt like I should have gotten at a younger age.
Got it. So the nurturing wasn't there, and you were craving that kind of connection and nurturing. Yeah, I understand. I relate. So we're talking about the power of human connection and, how it is transformative. And, just in our conversations today, just you sharing from your heart and, telling me about your story, it's moving. It's really incredible, this thing about human connection. What do you think? Why is that? What do you know about human connection, and why is it so important? Can you share that with me?
Well, I could get nerdy because since
go there too. Go there too.
I think what I've learned just from my own experience is that there are certain people, one, who crave this conversation and just seeing where it goes. Like, who has the curiosity to learn from others, who really wants to know. I mean, you're the one doing the question asking here today, so I'm really holding back, but I could fire away back to you. So I'm trying to be mindful of that. So there's part of that, but I also think it's this deep desire to simply want to contribute to somebody else in front of you, in whatever shape or form that presents itself in that time. But I will also say that there are some people that, and this is core to my transformation, is there are some people who see things that you cannot, and they want to tell you that. And the only way they can tell you that is if they have a decent connection to you. And so when you're able to find that ability to make the emotional loyalty to another or them to you, then you can say to somebody, and I'll say what somebody said to me. They said, David, what are you doing wasting your life going back to college to get a journalism degree and go back into radio and make nothing and kind of be nothing? You've experienced discrimination and the perils of the justice system and mental illness and addiction, and you need to be a lawyer. No one in my orbit even would have considered that, except for this one person who had her eyes open, a professor who's looking at my life, looking at my talents and saying, what are you doing? You go be a lawyer. That's where your best, highest use is. And I think that ability of being able to connect with somebody to then see that and go, I'm going to tell that person that thing. That's what I'm always looking for. Man, that's what I think we all should be seeking.
I agree. And you are so spot on to the core message and the issue that we are working on bringing to the world. It's these encounters, these relationships, these bits of advice and relationships that we get to have. Sometimes they seem chance. This professor that shared with you had the audacity or the boldness to say, David, what are you doing? Wake up. Don't go back there. Go into this. Go be a lawyer. Why? Why did this professor take interest in you and have the heart to do this? Why? What was going on there?
Well, so the backdrop of that was, so I 5 DUIs, end up in a jail in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, a little tiny town called Winter, and get out of that jail, go to a sober home in Sioux Falls, and just trying to figure out what am I going to do, and looking around and saying I can't stand in line every day to go do a breathalyzer twice a day, that my life's going nowhere, and I'm part-time on a radio station, and somebody says go back to college, and so I'm like, oh, I'll see if I can do that. And so I get there's a little bit more to that story, but I had written a letter to the judge and told the judge I'd like to go back to college. And I had called the University of North Dakota, asked if I could get back in. And they said, absolutely not. You got a 1.9 GPA. And, and I talked to the registrar, and the registrar says, why are you calling us? Why are you trying to get back into school? And I tell her the story. And I'm sitting in a sober home, and I'm on probation, and I'm a convicted felon. And there's this silence on the other side of the line. And she said, hold on a moment. And she leaves, and she comes back, and she said, all right, I talked to my boss. And you can kind of tell that she was emotional. She starts to cry a bit. And she said, I haven't talked to my son in months. She says, we're going to let you come back to school. She says, if I can help you, maybe find a way. And so I write a letter to the judge, and I say, Judge, I can go back to the University of North Dakota. I can live with my parents. Would you support me going back to school? And she writes back a couple of days later. This is the day of letters. And she says, absolutely not. If you want to go back to school, I highly support it, but you're going to pick one of our fine institutions here in the state of South Dakota. Good luck to you. Now, I grew up a University of North Dakota State fan. So if you're at all into sports, the other state rivalry is not where you want to go to school.
Right. Yeah, that's not what you're doing. No way.
No, there's loyalties, man. There's family things, and this is touchy. But I realized that there's a really great journalism school at the University of South Dakota, and I'm kind of built for that. So I get in, and I take an elective class, constitutional law. It's taught by a public defender, a former public defender. So she's an advocate at heart. She sees people, loves people. So that's just her character trait. And she assigns Supreme Court arguments to the class, and she assigns a case to me, which later she says to me, she goes, I signed this particular case to you because you grew up in a military family. She goes, I thought it would be hard for you to make the case that burning a flag should be permitted under the First Amendment. So she characterized me in a particular way, and she's like, I think that's going to be hard for him. And I stood up, and I didn't have an opinion on it one way or the other at the time, but I made the argument. And so 2 days later, I'm sitting in the library, and over pops one of my classmates, Chelsea, and Chelsea says, Sandy McEwen wants you in the mock trial practice. It starts in 2 minutes. Mind you, I am a convicted felon. I am on probation, doing twice daily breathalyzers. I'm back in college as a 29-year-old. I'm sober like maybe 8 or 9 months after 12 years of destructive addiction, depression, anxiety. The moniker for USD was not the University of South Dakota. It was the University of Sex and Drugs. I'm not in the place I should be.
You're in the wrong place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I tell
Chelsea, the wrong guy too, right?
And I tell Chelsea, I said, tell Sandy, no, I'm already writing for the student newspaper. I've got the minimum number of credits I can stand. I can't tell you why, but no way. She comes back 40 minutes later, and she says, no, you show up. So I show up, and Sandy forces me onto her mock trial team because I was actually pretty decent at it. And so I'm on a competition one time, and she and I are sitting at a Culver's eating butter burgers during a competition break. And she's 33. I'm 30. We basically the same age. And that's where she looks at me and she goes, what are you doing? Tell me your story. Why are you here? And so I tell her, and that's when she says, yeah, stop wasting your life. I will help you. I know you can't get into law school, but I will help you. I will do whatever it takes in my power between these 3 years to find a path for you to get into law school.
Amazing. Amazing. And I love that she pushed you way outside of your comfort zone too. Like the whole thing where she's like getting you to defend burning the American flag, right? Is like, she is intentionally trying to get you outside your comfort zone because she wants you to grow, clearly. So what goes on from there? You clearly have grown, right? This is this is a really important part of your story. So keep telling me more of this. This is wonderful.
Yeah, and I think the prompt for this season too is, who are those people, these mentors, these folks that come along, right? And what do they contribute to your transformation? And so Sandy was clearly one of them. And for the next 2 summers, she would drive the 6 hours out to Winter, South Dakota for a court hearing so that I could report my progress. And she would sit in the witness stand and tell Judge Kathleen Trandle, hey, I'm watching this guy. I'm watching him completely change before my eyes. I didn't know who he was before. You're telling me he was a terrible human being. I don't see that. I see somebody who is who's probably a better lawyer than most of the lawyers that come into this courtroom.
Oh man.
and so that's going on. And so,
what are you thinking when you're seeing this too? Like, what are you like, you're seeing this person do this for you. What are you thinking when this is happening?
I'm like, why? What is her investment in me? She doesn't know me from anybody. And is she doing this for the other students? And I come to find out, sort of, kind of, but she's not driving 6 hours to go to a hearing for most people. But she's doing other things for people, making connections and making phone calls and navigating schedule. I mean, she does a lot of that stuff. It's just who she is.
Shout out.
But what ended up happening is,
shout out to her.
I'm sorry.
Shout out to her. Yeah. Wow.
Sandy McEwen, University of South Dakota. She runs the criminal justice and political science department. She has changed more lives than most could ever actively think about. So I'm within those 3 years, I get a history degree, and at the end of the 3 years, after I had 3 years of college before, but didn't get a degree, so I finally finished a degree. When I walk across the stage and get my diploma, my probation, which was a 5-year probation, ended. So it ended early. The judge was willing to clear the path. I applied to 7 law schools, wrote out my heart in my letters, said, this is what I want to do, and had all great references, but every one of them said no. Not a very good test taker. So my LSAT scores were terrible. And so the University of South Dakota, though, they had a summer screener program. So I had already gotten into the master's program at USD. So I was going to do a master's. And oh, by the way, in the middle of all of this, I met my wife. She was a professor at the University of South Dakota. And we had did we get married at that point? Yes, we had gotten married somewhere along the line. But so I am going to be in the master's program. And then I get a letter that says, David, we're going to let you into the summer screener program at the University of South Dakota School of Law. There'll be 33 people with you for 6 weeks during the summer. And if you're in the top 10 scorers, we'll let you into the fall class. Okay. So if you've seen the movie The Hunger Games, take that and put it inside a law school with a bunch of wannabe lawyers. You can imagine laptops on fire, books getting burned. Yeah, it was terrible. But I survived. I was number 5 out of 10, and got into law school, did my 3 years, and kind of thought I was going to go be a public defender. And that was the path. Graduated, took the bar exam, passed the bar exam, but I'm a convicted felon, so I've got things to own up for. And so it took a year to go through the character and fitness process, but all along the way, had a lot of support. We could talk about what I interveningly got involved in. That was sort of this peer support program in between. But in August of 2013, I get a letter that says, we're going to conditionally admit you from the state Supreme Court, conditionally admit you to be a lawyer. You can go take your oath in 2 weeks. And so we pack up and we go out to the very same courtroom that I was sentenced in. And Judge Kathleen Trandle, who 8 years earlier sentenced me, a convicted DUI felon, swore me in as a lawyer in the state of South Dakota.
David, what a story. What a journey, man. Are you kidding me? Amazing.
Yeah.
So you get sworn in. What happens from there? What goes on from there?
Well, that's how you and I meet, kind of. Yeah, so there are these people that nudge you in different ways, right? So you've met Sandy McEwen, she was the professor. You've met Kathleen Trandle, she was the judge who took a liking to me. She went to my wedding, she went to my graduations. We're best friends today. We advocate for all kinds of stuff.
This is your
now.
judge. This is your judge.
Yeah.
Did I hear that right? And she's your best friend today.
One of my best friends. Yeah. We're fan. Yeah. It's just wild. Yeah. But another person that comes along is I come out of jail. My family picks me up. It's January 30th, 2006. They drive me to Sioux Falls. They take me to a sober home. They pay for 6 months of my rent. They buy me a bike, some clothes, and they turn on a phone for me. And they leave because they dealt with me for a long time. They're like, happy to see you're out of jail, but good luck. And the next day I'm sitting waiting to go to an AA meeting, and up pulls a brand new shiny A6 Audi, something I'd never even seen before in my life. And out pops this guy who's clearly doing well with his life. And I come to find out his name is Kevin. He was the one that opened the sober home. This was his home. He was a well-known business person and struggled with addiction. And this was his way of turning back to his community and saying, how can I solve these problems? And so he takes me to a meeting, and Kevin and I meet that day. He does not remember that meeting. But skip ahead about 2 years. I'm in my undergrad, and I see a flyer on the wall, and it's for this community town hall meeting in Sioux Falls. Now, Vermilion, South Dakota is an hour south of Sioux Falls, so it's an hour to go. I had gotten my license back, but I was still doing twice daily breathalyzers. So it's a Saturday, and I'm like, okay, I can go at 7 a.m. I can do the breathalyzer. The meeting starts at 9 o'clock at the Holiday Inn. I can drive an hour up. I'll go to this thing. And why did I want to go to the thing? Because it was asking a question. What would Sioux Falls, South Dakota look like if we treated addiction like the chronic disease that it is? I was like, I think I'd like to. And I knew Kevin. I was like, oh, I know that guy. I'll go contribute whatever I can contribute. Next thing you know, I'm writing the bylaws for this nonprofit organization called Face It Together. And it was going to be one of the first peer support organizations in the United States in 2007, 2008. And of course, I'm in the middle of trying to go to law school. So I do that thing. I help, I go to law school, I get distracted. But when I can't get a job, because I can't get it in the law yet, I'm basically in purgatory, I email Kevin. And I say, Kevin, you've helped me out. You know everybody. Whatever you can do, I'd be grateful. And true to Kevin, he didn't respond. But he sent the COO of Face It Together after me, Charlie Day. And Charlie said, hey, we're opening up a new office downtown. The way Face It Together was organized was there was a local nonprofit doing the services. And there was a second nonprofit, the national organization, that was the think tank, which was going to take what was created locally and blow it up. And he says, why don't you come help us with that? And so that was 2012. And I went to work for Face It Together. And so, Kevin was the founder of that organization. I worked for Face It Together for almost 8-9 years, designing and developing peer support and peer coaching, and got to learn really everything I know about business and leadership from a guy who I got into his car at a sober home some years earlier.
What a great journey. Now you're face it together. You have to be also sort of fired up about this because of your own experience and how you've been helped and how other people have helped you face your stuff, right? So what was it about, doing that work that, besides the necessity of maybe being a little bit unemployable, based on what you just mentioned, what was it about that work that was drawing you to it? What was it?
We had the fortune of being able to just think about problems. Yes, we were trying to create our little local solution, but we zoomed out. We were always talking about what's the 50,000 foot view of addiction in the United States. And that really drew me in, because what happened was I'm sitting in the office one Friday. Everybody had gone. It was the two co-founders, Kevin and Charlie, in the conference room with the CEO of one of the two health systems in Sioux Falls. And the health systems were really important to our model, to what we were thinking at the time. We wanted to mainstream addiction care into healthcare. And so we kept pushing that boulder up the hill. And the CEO says to Kevin and Charlie, look, if you really want to do that, and you want to have the medical home model was kind of the thing that was coming about at the time. Like, if you really want to bring that together with us, you guys need some data first. And so Charlie, who was mid-late 60s at the time, former CFO of one of the two health systems, consultant for mergers and acquisitions at Price Waterhouse, lawyer, CPA, super brilliant. One of the smartest people I've ever known. His mantra was, if you're sitting in a meeting and you hear what you're supposed to hear, the meeting's over. End it. And so he did, like the kids say, he literally got up from the meeting and he walked over to my desk and he saunters over and he put his arm around me and he says, David, you've got 30 days. Figure out how to measure recovery. And I looked at him and I go, I don't know what you're talking about, Charlie. I've been sober for 8,000, 9,000 days. I don't know. I've stopped counting a while ago. Isn't that how we measure it? And without skipping a beat, he goes, I don't think that's it. There's got to be more to it. Figure it out. And so that was like the Matrix. Here's the red pill. Here's the blue pill. I took them both, went for a wild ride, and I got to pick up the phone and talk to anybody and everybody you could think of in the science of measuring human change for months. And, you've been on this mission with the Care Predictor. I went down that same rabbit hole, and it was a problem that we had to solve within our organization, just like you. How do we measure what we do, and how do we describe to people the altered life of people's transformation from one thing to the next? What are the indicators of that? And the concept that we came to was recovery capital. And so that became my one part of my role in this organization was doing that and creating an instrument and validating it and getting it published so I could go sit in front of a PhD and a doctor somewhere and not get yelled at because this thing hadn't been tested, which I had done for 6 years.
It's so amazing, your journey, hearing your journey and how this all just sort of all comes together. It puts you in this really important place to do really important work and to impact many, many lives. This one sort of broken sort of, hodgepodge of a life is now being rechanneled, repurposed to help, not to over, describe it, but it is a big mission. You have this opportunity now to impact society at large and make a big impact. And why is it that outcomes are important? Like, let's unpack it from two sides. One, from the person that's in recovery, the person that's going through the journey themselves, and why is it important to the industry?
Well, I'd add one other stakeholder to that, and that is the family member of the person going through the treatment. I think the first people looking to know anything is mom and dad or husband, wife, spouse, whoever. And they're asking the question, if I send my son Michael into this place that I've never heard of before, and these people whom I don't know, and that carries all sorts of baggage, how do I know that Michael's going to be okay? All I see on their website is, what insurance do you have? And, there's like 18,000 blog posts. I'm really indicting a lot of the addiction treatment in the moment. And, sometimes hard truths are required, but, so I think that's part of it. It's like, just tell me what happens when my Michael comes through here. Is he going to still be sober in 30 days? Is he still going to be sober in 90 days, 180 days? Can you answer me that question? And most like, no, we can't answer that question. And like, why not? Well, we call Michael and Michael doesn't answer his phone. Well, why not? Well, because it's hard. And Michael went back to drinking again. Okay. And he doesn't want to talk to us. Well, why not? Well, I don't know. We did everything we could. It was his fault. Like that's the actual conversation. So that's why I think it's important. I think it's important to be able to describe very clearly with specificity. And I don't care what you call it. How you can define everything is measurable. Pick a thing, measure it. So I'll give you an example. Let's workshop this for a moment. Our mission statement at Face It Together was to get addiction sufferers well. So addiction sufferers, we can measure that. David walks in the door. Are you suffering with this thing we call addiction? Yes, I am. Have you been diagnosed before? Yes, I have. Check the box. So that's a volumetric yes or no. Got it. Well, now here's where it gets complicated. What's well? But we get to define that. We can say, well means fill in the blank. And I get to call you 6 months later and go, okay, do you fit this definition today or no? And you tell us. Cool. It's not hard. What's hard is sticking to it and maintaining the commitment to whatever that description of success is. So I think that's why it's important first for the family member and the person struggling is to be able to say, when we do X with you and when you do Y with us, we believe that in 30 days and 6 months or a year, this is what this can look like. And that our goal is to help you get there. We don't need fancy predictive anything. I mean, we can go there if we want, but we just need to be able to have some benchmark, some baseline sense. This is what happens when we do our thing to you.
Is it a means of accountability? Is it a means of, creating a target? Tell me more about that.
Well, I think yes, it's both of those. Accountability for an organization. I mean, if you really believe as a company, as an organization that's serving people, you should really understand what it is that is success for you. And if you're not meeting that statement of success, then you got to go do something else.
Oh, you mean like most other endeavors? Is that what you're saying? Like
that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, for those of us that didn't grow up in the industry, right? It's like that's how the world runs. Yeah. And so there's that. And then, on the other side of it is, I think that we do need to have some sense of, does at the heart of what we're doing in this community have an impact? Because at the end of the day, like we say, all politics is local or all economics is local. All healthcare is local. And you've heard my story and you've got a story and your story has great ripples of effect and change and hope and all those things. And what does that look like in a particular community? And I think you have to be, as a person operating a facility of addiction care in a city in the United States, your number one stakeholder is the community that's looking around going, why are there still 110,000 overdoses a year? So I think the order to the mission is higher than just that second part of the equation that you talked about is payers and other stakeholders around the business model.
Yeah. Takes a village though, doesn't it? You got to coalesce, you got to bring together, a number of different stakeholders in that endeavor. But as a provider, you hold a very special place in making that impact in your local community and improving things. So I agree with you. I'm curious, as we're coming to a close here, can you give me, around your mission of outcomes, can you paint the picture for me as to, 5 years forward, what's this world going to look like around, what do you envision when you dream, David, because you're a dreamer and you're an innovator? Tell me what this looks like. I'm really curious. Tell me where we're going. Where do you think we're headed? If you have your way, David Whitesock, what is going to happen in this world? That's what I want to know. Because I'm going to watch it and I'm going to support it. So tell me, what's it going to look like? Get us there.
Well, if I had my way, I would want to try to, what I would like to see is some consolidation of addiction care services into a real system in specific communities that, strip away the friction. We use technology so that, we have one record of David, and I carry that on my phone or in something. And when I walk into a facility, you get my token, you know who I am, you know where I've been. There's no other second guessing. I don't have to repeat anything. Maybe I've got to update some info, but that's part one, is just having better information about people and that these systems talk, because that kills people every day. Somebody's sitting in a hospital bed somewhere and one system can't talk to the other system because of HIPAA and 42 CFR Part 2. And now this person is getting treated in a way that they shouldn't. And I think we can solve that problem. And I think if we solve that problem, I think less people die. I think more people stay in their own communities to get care, as opposed to going hundreds of thousands of miles, which is also incredibly disruptive to kids and families and work and a whole bunch of other stuff. No offense to all my friends that run really great 30-day treatment facilities, but I think we need to have a much more community-focused approach to the services that we provide to the people that we live with or live around. And then we have to have very clearly articulated measures of success. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing, I think will add some of that focus on it. And now that we're in the age of artificial intelligence, I think the way that we have been thinking about how therapists do this work, it's gonna come down to me picking up this thing in the morning and saying to it, so we already know what we're going to call our artificial intelligence.
What is it? Can you
share it with you? Yeah. So, and it's an homage to somebody who saved my life. We're going to call it Kirby. So I can imagine 5 years from now, someone's going to pick up Kirby and go, hey, Kirby, who are my next 3 appointments today? Tell me a little bit about their progress up to this point. And what are the top things I need to be concerned about in my sessions with those 3 people? And it's going to speak back to me and it's going to tell me what I need to know. It's going to highlight those issues. And I'm going to be more prepared with an augmented set of information coming from a lot of different sources, so that I can now sit down with the first person I have to sit down with and actually be a human in human relationship with that person. That's what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be right where we are. It's going to be this combination of physical and digital clashing, so that much more human interaction takes place in the places that we live.
I love your vision of the future. It is exciting. May it be so. And any way that I can support you as you are supporting me as well in my endeavors, I'm all in. And lastly, can you share with the audience where they could find you on the internet? People, want to reach out and connect with thought leaders and subject matter experts like yourself. Where can people find you if they're looking for David Whitesock?
Yeah, commonlywell.com. is the website. If you were to search Google and search my name, David Whitesock, I have a personal website that would come up as well, davidwhitesock.com. Otherwise, the best place you can find me for what I think about things is going to be on LinkedIn. That seems to be the place these days. And it's a place that you and I share ideas and push each other. And I'm really grateful for this conversation and you asking that question, what does the world look like in 5 years? And I want to twist the tables and hear that from you the next time.
Yeah, I'll share it. I'll share it with you the next time we get together. David, thank you for sharing your vision, sharing your story, sharing your heart. You knocked the ball out of the park. Thank you so much.
There's so much to learn from David's story, and he really paints a compelling vision for the future of mental health care and recovery. But something he said really stood out.
I think it's important to be able to describe very clearly with specificity. And I don't care what you call it. How you can define everything is measurable. So I think that's why it's important first for the family member and the person struggling is to be able to say, when we do X with you and when you do Y with us, we believe that in 30 days and 6 months or a year, this is what this can look like. And that our goal is to help you get there.
Make sure to subscribe to this show on your favorite platform and leave us a comment. We'll see you next time. But for now, go and live an altered life.